Hey everyone, welcome back. Igon here. Thanks for checking out another episode of Esports Analysis. Today, we are hopping back on board with Formal. This is another matchup with the Atlanta Faze. Now, I will say real quick, just before we get into the actual analysis and the breakdown and all that, people gave me a little bit of flack yesterday because I uploaded the one map that Chicago won. So, as a whole, Atlanta won this scrim 6 maps to 1, so it was a 6-1 map count. And I uploaded the one that Chicago won just because it's easier to break down the flow of the map, what's happening and whatnot when they're winning, because they're able to control the map and you can see what's happening with actual spawns and flank rotations and stuff like that. Whereas right now, like with everybody dead for Chicago, it's really hard to explain where they're at, how they're set up, why they're being successful. So in this one, Chicago gets absolutely destroyed. I think it's like 250 to 80 or something like that. So we'll do our best to kind of point out what they're doing wrong and what they need to be doing better along the way, even though they're going to be getting killed quite a bit. Real quick, just a really fast announcement real quick. Down in the description below, I made my own Discord. There were quite a few people that were asking for an own personal Discord of mine. So if you want to communicate, if you want to team up with people, I have 10s lobbies, I have 3s lobbies for Warzone, all that sort of stuff. So there's a link down there if you want to go. There were like 50 people that joined yesterday. So if you're looking for a place to play, people to join up with, that's a good place to do it. But as we go ahead and talk about the actual rotations, first thing that you'll notice that as this is rotating back from P1 to P2, Chicago is spawning out and a BZ with a 2-piece, Major Maniac with a 2-piece, Simp with the kill. So not only were they not in position to start the map, but they didn't do anything during P1 to be able to flip. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pause this real quick, minimap top right hand corner, just so you guys can get a better idea in terms of what's happening with the map. Chicago got this spawn down here, and then Atlanta got the spawn in the top right-hand corner. The top right-hand corner spawn is the one that's more beneficial to start the map because not only, so P1 doesn't really matter all that much. Most of the time, that's a contested territory. But as it rotates back to P2, you want to have this back spawn so it's easier to get inside. So at this point in time, what Atlanta is really good at is they're really good at getting kills in this area before the reserves from Chicago can go ahead and push in and try to contest the hill, right? So if they were to wait until they get all the way up by the hill, then that's a little bit easier to break. But since they're pushed out, and you can see, even on the mini-map right now, look at where all the green arrows are at. There's 25 seconds, and at this point in time, they're just going to give it up. But you could see that all the green arrows were on the complete opposite side of the map. So not only did they lose P1, right? They weren't, well, they won on time in P1, but when I say they lost P1, I say they lost because they weren't able to get a flip, right? So P1 is basically contested, but what you're really trying to do on P1 is get a flip. So you could say that they lost P1, so Chicago lost P1 because they weren't able to flip, and then they lost P2 also because they just didn't have spawns. And now, even already, they're getting ready to set up for a flank over towards P4. So that was a really aggressive play from Simp there. He's basically already trying to get position inside of Cave West for P4. He wasn't the most successful in that regards, but even so, it didn't hurt him, right? There's 35 seconds left in the current hill. Formal's the only one that's even relatively close. Yeah, he's able to get this kill, but my guess would be he's probably going to get traded out right here. If he's going to try to be inside of the hard point with an AR, yeah, it's just not going to work out, right? So the last 20 seconds here are also going to go for Atlanta. Now, we're at like 15 seconds left in P3. If you're Formal, I'm not real sure why you're still contesting this. You should probably be providing support to your teammates inside of P4, and this is exactly what you can't have happen. Let me go ahead and pause this just for a second, because when it was at P3, so we were at P3 again, I'm drawing in the minimap top right hand corner. Atlanta had control of it, and remember, Atlanta's coming from this side. So essentially what they're doing is they're pushing through. They could also push through over this way, which is where you saw Simp get that kill right here on Formal. And essentially what just happened is not only did they max out the time in P3, but what they were able to do when they had control of P3, they were able to push out both sides and get control of P4. And as this happens, so they have control of P4, they pushed out this back spawn, and they're in P3. Where's the only place that's left? The only place that's left for Chicago to spawn is over here on the opposite side of the map. So a little bit of an advancement in terms of strategies here, because most of the time teams are just trying to hold down P3, and then they're going to give up P4 in hopes of setting up for P5. But if you're Chicago, this is probably about the worst case scenario for the start here. The only thing that might be going your way is the fact that Atlanta wasn't really racking up time there. They spent the first 15 seconds kind of setting up spawns and pushing out a little bit. Even right now, Atlanta still isn't getting time inside the current hardpoint. So I don't know, maybe that was a little bit of a mistake from Atlanta. I think a lot of times what I'll see from Atlanta also is that they can get pushed out too far. So rather than trying to focus just on the hill time, sometimes they push out a little bit too far, and perhaps that's what happened right there. So with that kill, I'd imagine that Chicago, or maybe even not. Wow. It was a little bit, I was a little bit surprised to see Simp and who was that? Major Maniac. So they still had 2 people over by P4 for Chicago, or for Atlanta, which is a little bit interesting to see because most of the time you've already started rotations back towards P5. So now as we're P5, again, this is Atlanta seems really worried about what's going on with the flank routes and the spawns, and I'm not going to blame them for that, but they also gave up a little bit of time, right? There was like the first 10 seconds of P5 that they weren't necessarily inside of, and the first 15 seconds of P4. So they could have another 25 points towards their total right now. But obviously, I mean, look at the score. They're up by 115 points right now, and clearly it's not really going to matter. And once you have control of P5, this one is extremely hard to break, right? There's only really 2 ways that you can make that happen. So again, minimap, top right-hand corner. I won't stop the video, but if you have control of P5, there's 1 route and there's 2 routes. You do have to watch the back, but if you have somebody up here at top sandbags, they can control or they can watch what's happening on the flank route. So if you can control all 3 of that, not only are you going to be able to hold down spawns as it rotates back to P1, because after P1 you want to have spawns for P2, but winning that first set of rotations 160 to 30, that's a complete and total beatdown, and essentially every step of the way as it went to P2 on first set of rotations, Atlanta had spawns, right? As it went to P3, they were able to push through and they had spawns for P3. The big control there was that from P3 to P4 they were able to push through and spawn Chicago out at P5, and then as it rotated back to P5 they again were able to successfully rotate and they had rotations for P5. So every single hill, the first set of rotations, Atlanta had locked down, and even now as it's going back through the second set of rotations, they kept that back P5 spawn. Now that they're inside of P1, not only are they getting the time, or they got the majority of the time inside P1, but they also have the spawns locked down for P2. So I'd imagine that this game probably isn't going to last too much longer, but this is normally the time in the videos where I let you guys listen into Chicago's team talk so you can hear what's going on with communication and strategies and all of that. So we don't have too much left, but let's go ahead, let's listen in and hear exactly what they're talking about.
Good job.
1 bullet.
I spawned front cave. Hang on,
Go try to kill Hill.
I'll stare at sandbag. I'll stare at sandbag.
Go weak, and 1 got me under
He's on the truck, pressing dead. More hill.
Try to help. Ivy up yellow here.
Front, Simp dead. One more hill. Maniac and hill. 2
back.
Let's go back to hill. Both. Let's go back to hill.
Fucking died.
Both back hill.
You're right there. Try to.
One struck 2. Truck's not peeking.
So one thing, let me point something out real quick. At this point in time, there's 20 seconds left in the current hard point, right? So this hill is definitely over. Last thing you want to do is just continue to push through and give up map position. If you're Chicago right now, so Atlanta has control of the hill, they're spawning back here. If you're Chicago, if you were hoping to get back into this game, and they're probably just figuring, wow, this one's over, we got completely smacked, it is what it is. But if you're trying to get back into the game, what you need to do is have somebody set up here by P1. You need to have a couple people watching this exit lane here by P2. So kind of this mid cave route, and have somebody up at top stone watching this flank route over here. Essentially what you need to do is you need to lock off these exits from P2. So if you can get kills in this range right here, what that's going to allow is it's basically a spawn trap, right? You're going to keep Atlanta spawning back in that corner, and then just have Scump or Arcides or somebody like that inside the current hill. And if you're able to do that, then you can really max out an extra 60 seconds. And if you continue to spawn trap them back there, now you can roll that extra 60 seconds into P4. So it seems like they're probably just giving up. All right, you know what? We already lost. Let's go ahead. This is just a scrim. It doesn't really matter all that much. So perhaps they're just, let's just get this over with and let's go on to the next map. You kind of hear everybody laughing there. So it's a little bit more easy going, I guess, than you would normally say. But if this was a tournament or something like that, if you were a team watching this, that's what you would want to do. You'd want to start setting up that spawn trap. You don't want to allow them outside of P2 just so that then you can set up the spawns and everything inside of P3. I'll let you guys listen in for the last few seconds here.
Front, Maniac. I got the guy front yellow. Maniac front, one shot. Maniac front, one shot. I need a gun. I killed the guy pushing through. Top yellow.
I don't know how he's there.
Yellow, dude.
We flipped.
Yellow, dude. More top stone. Top stone right now, Maniac.
Top salad, probably. Top salad.
More two stone. Spawning fifth. Spawning front fifth.
Got me, Silo.
One side. Okay, he's front hotel challenge.
That's a gun battle that varsities can't lose right there. It's super important in terms of positioning and having control of the current hill.
Do that.
Got me now.
Simpson middle, major, dead.
That's one more hill.
In hotel again.
Nothing crossing. Nothing broken. They could spawn up middle here, guys.
One top.
Going new here.
You got me.
Push you guys up.
Fight hill. So then, one more top or something. Top right.
Right now. I'm on new.
Right side hill too. One's going top.
They don't want that anymore. I'm going new. Holy shit.
I'm on new right now. Waiting for you guys.
I'm coming.
Top yellow Simp.
So at this point in time, they kind of realized with 7 or 8 seconds left that Atlanta wasn't close enough to win on P3, so they went and they rotated earlier towards P4. If they slay out here, they're going to be able to max out the 60 seconds here for P4. But even so, if it was to rotate back to P5, that would be all bad because they would be spawning out. But even so, they pushed up. I'd be shocked if they're able to get back in and stop this.
Pitching doggy.
I got him hill.
Well, he's benching here.
That's a really nice job of Simp of pitching there. A lot of teams would probably... Let me show you that just real quick. I know that the match is over, but essentially what happened is that Atlanta was able to come from P3, right? They were at P3. They had this spawn. They were able to come through mid-cave and get kills inside of P4. So then they had control of P4, and Chicago was spawning out back here. And essentially, that was a really heady play from Sim. Rather than just flood inside of P4 and continue to try to get kills in these choke points, he went mid-map, he came up here, and essentially that's when they said that he was pinching. He was able to get kills out here, even if he kills 2 and then he ends up dying, right? So he ends up being, that's a +1 in terms of, kill and death and whatnot. But essentially what that does is that makes it easier for people that are inside of P4. Now, all of a sudden, those inside of P4 only have to kill 3 to maintain control of P4 rather than it being like a 5v5. So it was a nice job of pinching there and giving his team numbers inside of P4.
Yeah. Well, see, that's like
Don't really care too much about the final play here. I do want to see the stats just to kind of see who slayed out, who did really well, who didn't perform all that well and stuff like that. CELLIUM slaying out like always. But as we look at this, Envoy was -3, Scump was -5, Formal was -12. Everybody was negative. The whole entire team was negative. And if you look at the other side, CELLIUM 34 and 19, Abizi 26, Priest at 26, Simp 28 and 21. Just a really good job out of them. One thing that I will say real quick before we end up wrapping this up is that we don't know like where this host was either, right? Now, everybody would agree that Atlanta is the better team, but if this host was a little bit more towards Atlanta, then that just benefits them a little bit. So maybe some of those gunfights would have went the other way. But give Atlanta all their props. They absolutely dominated this matchup, so good for them. So if this is your first time tuning into my videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I put out new videos every single day breaking down scrims like this, so make sure you do that. If you have any comments whatsoever, put them down in the comments below. I try to get back to everybody. Leave a like before you head on your way. Thank you guys so much for the support recently. I super appreciate it. And with that, I will catch you in tomorrow's upload.